In the summer of 1862, over 110,000 soldiers stood ready to fight near Manassas, Virginia, in a battle that would turn into one of the most fierce and frightening moments of the American Civil War. The war had been raging for over a year. The Union, led by President Abraham Lincoln, was determined to preserve the nation, while the Confederacy, under President Jefferson Davis, fought for its independence. The Union Army, still recovering from its defeat at the First Battle of Bull Run the previous year, was under immense pressure to secure a decisive victory. The Union's primary goal was the protection of Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, which lay in precarious proximity to Confederate territory. General George B. McClellan's Peninsula Campaign, an attempt to capture the Confederate capital of Richmond, had ended in a stalemate, leading to frustration in the North. To rejuvenate the Union war effort, President Lincoln appointed General John Pope to command the newly formed Army of Virginia. Pope, known for his aggressive stance against the Confederacy, was tasked with drawing Confederate forces away from Richmond and towards northern Virginia, thereby reducing the pressure on McClellan's forces. Meanwhile, the Confederate Army, under the leadership of General Robert E. Lee, saw an opportunity to demoralize the Union and possibly sway foreign powers to recognize the Confederacy, and planned an ambitious northern offensive. His army, invigorated by the success at the First Battle of Bull Run, aimed to disrupt Pope's forces before they could consolidate with McClellan's troops, thereby weakening the Union's military presence in Virginia. As August 1862 dawned, the stage was set for a major confrontation. The Union Army, commanded by General John Pope, numbered approximately 62,000 soldiers, and they faced a slightly smaller Confederate force of about 50,000 troops, led by General Robert E. Lee. The Confederate Army, divided into wings under the command of Generals Thomas Stonewall Jackson and James Longstreet, maneuvered to engage Pope's forces before they could unite with McClellan's. Pope, aware of the Confederate movements, aimed to strike swiftly and decisively, hoping to isolate and destroy Jackson's corps and pave the way for advance towards Richmond. This sets the stage for the intense and complex series of maneuvers and engagements that would happen in the Second Battle of Bull Run. General Robert E. Lee divided his army, a risky move given its proximity to the larger Union forces. Lee sent General Thomas Stonewall Jackson on a flanking maneuver to strike at Pope's supply lines at Manassas Junction. Jackson's corps, moving rapidly and stealthily, succeeded in capturing the Union supply depot at Manassas Junction even before the main battle began, disrupting Pope's logistical support. Pope, upon learning of Jackson's maneuver, redirected his forces to attack Jackson, seeing an opportunity to destroy Lee's divided army piece by piece. However, Lee had anticipated this reaction. He ordered General James Longstreet to follow Jackson with the rest of the Confederate Army, setting up a potential trap for Pope's forces. The ensuing days saw a complex dance of movements, feints, and countermaneuvers. Then, on August 28th, something unexpected happened. General Stonewall Jackson rode up next to the marching Union troops disguised as a farmer. His presence, however, went unnoticed by the Union soldiers, who disregarded what they thought was a harmless farmer. It was late in the afternoon when a part of Jackson's troops, who were hidden in the woods near Bronner's farm, were spotted by a Union brigade. The Union soldiers, thinking they had caught a small group of Confederates off guard, decided to attack. But it wasn't a small group. Jackson had most of his troops there. The fight started suddenly. Bullets flew through the air and cannon fire shook the ground. The battle at Bronner's farm was fierce and loud, with both sides pouring in more and more troops as the sun set. As the 2nd Wisconsin Infantry emerged onto John Bronner's farm, they faced a brutal volley from the Stonewall Brigade, leading to a stand-up fight with little cover. The battle lines were so close that the two sides were within 50 yards of each other, sending volleys of fire at each other as fast as rifles could be reloaded. The Union soldiers fought bravely, pushing forward against heavy fire. The Confederates, though caught by surprise, quickly got into position and fought back with equal ferocity. The battle raged on into the evening, with neither side giving way. As darkness fell, the gunfire finally started to slow, but the field was a tragic sight. The battle, though essentially a stalemate, came at a heavy cost. With more than 1,150 Union and 1,250 Confederate casualties, the engagement was so intense that 1 in every 3 men engaged was shot. Jackson, having raided the supply depot, moved his troops to an unfinished railroad grade near Groveton, preparing a strong defensive position. Anticipating an attack from General Pope, Jackson strategically positioned his 20,000 men in a defensive line. Pope, convinced that he had Jackson isolated, wanted to capture him and launched a series of assaults against Jackson's position on August 29th. However, Jackson's defenses proved formidable, and the Union attacks were repulsed with heavy casualties. As the morning of August 30th dawned, General John Pope, commanding the Union Army, was brimming with confidence. He mistakenly believed that he had Confederate General Stonewall Jackson's forces isolated and vulnerable near an unfinished railroad grade near Groveton. Pope, eager to exploit this supposed advantage, ordered a massive attack against Jackson's position. Unbeknownst to Pope, the situation was dramatically different. Confederate army was not divided as Pope believed. In fact, General James Longstreet's forces had already arrived on the battlefield, reinforcing Jackson's position. This critical piece of information, however, was not known to Pope, who proceeded under the assumption that he was dealing only with Jackson's troops. The Union forces launched their attack in the early afternoon, aiming to break through Jackson's line, which they thought was weakened and retreating. The Union soldiers advanced with determination, but they were met with a fierce and brutal resistance. Jackson's men, entrenched behind the railroad embankment, unleashed a devastating fire. The battle involved fierce hand-to-hand combat, particularly in the woods. Union brigades clashed violently with Confederate forces, leading to heavy casualties. Artillery barrages and counter-battery fire added to the chaos, with both sides suffering under the relentless exchange of fire. The fighting was intense and brutal, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. As the Union troops were engaged in this fierce fight against Jackson's line, the true nature of their predicament became horrifyingly clear. In the mid-afternoon, Longstreet, seeing the Union forces preoccupied with Jackson, initiated a powerful counterattack on the Union left flank. This was a masterful move by the Confederate leadership, taking full advantage of the Union's misjudgment. Longstreet's assault was overwhelming. With fresh troops and the element of surprise on their side, the Confederates struck with such force that the Union left flank, already stretched thin and exhausted from the ongoing battle, began to crumble. The Union soldiers, caught between Jackson's immovable defense in front and Longstreet's crushing force on their flank, found themselves in a scary situation. The Union lines started to break under this two-pronged Confederate assault. The disciplined formation of the Union Army began to dissolve into chaos. Soldiers, overrun and outflanked, started a disorganized retreat. What began as an orderly withdrawal soon turned into a panic and chaos. As the Union troops retreated across Bull Run, they faced further harassment from Confederate artillery. The retreat was chaotic, with soldiers and equipment clogging the roads. The bridges over Bull Run became choke points, adding to the confusion and disarray of the retreating Union forces. As the dust settled on the fields of Manassas, the aftermath of the Second Battle of Bull Run revealed a landscape marked by devastation and loss. The battle, which had raged fiercely over 3 days, left thousands of soldiers from both the Union and Confederate armies dead or wounded. The Union Army suffered approximately 14,000 casualties, while the Confederates incurred about 8,000. Sons, fathers, and brothers whose lives were forever changed or cut short by the conflict. The Union's defeat at Second Bull Run was a significant blow to its military efforts. Pope was soon relieved of his command, and the Army of Virginia was merged into the Army of the Potomac under General George McClellan. This battle showed the Union Army's vulnerabilities and the need for more effective leadership and strategy. For the Confederacy, the victory at Second Bull Run was a moment of triumph. It boosted Southern morale and solidified General Robert E. Lee's reputation as a brilliant military strategist. The success of the Confederate forces in this battle encouraged Lee to continue his aggressive tactics, leading him to launch his first invasion of the North. This campaign culminated in the Battle of Antietam, one of the bloodiest battles in American history. Strategically, the Battle of Second Bull Run was a turning point in the Civil War. It shifted the momentum to the Confederacy, at least temporarily, and opened the door for Confederate incursions into Union territory.